From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are back with FLALAW live on the radio. Thank you for tuning in. It is your 5 o'clock hour, and we are here with your live legal call-in talk show. So if you are interested in legal live commentary and you want to join in the conversation or share with friends and family, now's the time to do so, because we will be here for the next hour answering your live legal questions live on the air, and also streaming live through various platforms. So I'm going to give you all the details so that you can stay engaged and tuned in throughout the show tonight. Like I said, we'll be on for the next hour, and we want to make sure that you get your thoughts and comments heard. And we'd love to hear from you tonight on the show. As our intro stated, this is FLALAW live on the radio, brought to you by the attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. I am Jacqlyn Bryant. I'm one of the attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Lorraine Robinson, who I have not been able to have a show with lately. It's been a while since we've been able to come on the show together. So I'm excited that we're back here in the studio and bringing this show to you live right now. With that being said, I want to make sure that everybody can continue to watch and tune in all the various ways that we have available to you tonight. Number one being, obviously, we are live on the air. So hopefully you can tune in on your radio and continue to listen to the show. That way, if you have a question or comment, if you're a new listener and you just want to engage in the conversation, the best way to do that is to call into the studio tonight. The phone number for that is 727-441-3000. Again, the call-in number to talk to us, ask legal questions tonight on the show is 727-441-3000. That's going to be the best way to call in, get your questions answered live on the air. However, if you are not able to stay tuned in on the radio and you want to listen to one of our streaming, or you like to just see us in the studio, it does add a visual element. We are live in the studio. You can see us on Facebook and YouTube right now. So if you want to tune into those streaming sessions and leave comments in the chat, you can do that on Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes Injury Lawyers in Facebook and YouTube. So if you type that into either of those platforms, you should be able to find us. There should be a red circle around our logo that lets you know that we are live. You should be able to see Lorrie and myself in the studio. If you can find that, then you're in the right place. And you can ask your questions right there in the comment section, and I'll read those out over the air as we go throughout the show. So feel free to chime in, ask questions, leave a comment. If you know information about what we're talking about and you'd like to add to the discussion, definitely do that. We want to hear from everybody tonight. I'm actually going to go ahead and share tonight's live stream with my friends on Facebook, so that, of course, anybody that I know can also tune into the show. I encourage you to do the same. So share it. You never know what family member, friend, or loved one, someone could benefit from what we're going to be talking about tonight. People go through all kinds of things, and accidents and injuries and these sorts of things happen to a great number of us. And so just about anybody can benefit from this legal conversation that we're going to have. So we hope you can tune in and share it and like the post. The more you do that, the more people will be able to see it, and the more people will be able to benefit from the conversation. If you can't stay on the whole time, no worries. We have a podcast, and that is something that you can listen to at any time at your leisure. You can pause it, start it, listen to it on the way home or in the morning when the show goes off the air. You can still listen to it, and you can go back and listen to old past episodes as well. There's a lot of great shows on there. We've had a lot of great guests over the years. So you can certainly find those on just about any place that you can consume podcasts. We are on there. Just search for FLALAW on the radio, and you will find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, just about anywhere that you can look up a podcast. You can find us there. Encourage you to follow us. That way, anytime there's a new show posted, you'll get the notifications about it. And this show from tonight will also be posted after it's aired. So we encourage you to become one of our followers so that you never miss a show, and you can always go back and catch some good content. We had a great show last week. I don't know if you were able to tune in.
I did watch it on Facebook, actually.
Exactly. I tuned in on Facebook as well. And it was the founder of Eye on Tampa Bay, and he is obviously someone that is on the pulse of things that are going on in our community and breaking news in Tampa Bay area. So it was a really great show, and I thought that we had a good amount of engagement during that show. But it inspired my show for tonight. It's something that we've done before, but of course it seems even more timely now that we have brought in the guy that does the breaking news, and he's very popular for it. Everybody kind of follows Eye on Tampa Bay for what's going on around the community. Whenever there's a big news story of any kind, really, you can usually find it on that platform. And so we've done some current events shows in the past where we would kind of pull up things that have happened lately in our community and kind of analyze those from a civil litigation background or from a negligence perspective. And so that is not necessarily new, but we hadn't quite done it in a while. And I think it's a good time to bring that back. And I'm pretty sure that probably 90% of the stories we talk about tonight have probably already been featured on Eye on Tampa Bay and probably posted there. And so there's probably already some commentary and engagement about these articles. I didn't check to see if our first story's on there, but I wouldn't be surprised because it just happened yesterday in Clearwater. But before we get into the current events, I want to, of course, give Lorrie a chance just to say hello to our listeners so that everybody knows who's going to be chatting with them tonight, who we have on the air. And she's been on the show many, many times. But of course, I want to give her a chance to introduce herself and say hello.
Always happy to be on the show with you, Jacqlyn. And occasionally I'll be on with Matt Noyes as well. And I share, particularly as we get into some of the stories today, but the very first one in particular, being an old-time Clearwater person, there's certain things you notice. And when the Christmas store has a problem, it's like, oh, no. But as our listeners will know from past shows, I've been with the firm for, I guess now it's since 1998. And really, it's just a great environment, as you know, too. It's
absolutely.
We're able to have very interesting work where we're able to help people.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that does happen as you practice law over a period of time, I know my mother would share to me, it's like, it's sure good to have a lawyer you kind of on call 24 hours a day,
exactly
which was true, of course, with our family kind of thing. So many things in our world do have those legal implications. And
absolutely.
We do try to share a little bit of our background and knowledge with the community because of that.
Absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head. This type of thing that we do every Tuesday at 5, I think is so rewarding and it's valuable to the community because, again, you have access to just call up the lawyer that you know, and then you hopefully feel like you know us by now. We've been coming to you live every Tuesday for a couple years now, and I hope that people feel empowered to call and ask those questions when they have these legal issues. And so that's what we're here for. And again, please continue to share the broadcast. Let folks know that we are live on the air and we are answering your legal questions. So with that being said, as I mentioned, we're talking about real headlines tonight, things that have happened here in the Tampa Bay area. As you all know, that our main office is located here in Clearwater, right on the corner of Sunset Point and Belcher Road. We do have offices in St. Pete and various satellites all throughout the state of Florida. But with that being said, this is focused on our dear Clearwater, the first story. And it's funny because when you emailed me about this particular store, I've seen it a million times. Yes. And I'm actually the opposite, that I've always wanted to go in and I had never done it. And so when I saw this story, it stood out to me. And I almost didn't even realize that it was a year round. I thought it was kind of seasonal, that they were only open a couple months out of the year. But I did not realize that this store is actually open all throughout the year long. So I want to read this first story because it's most timely. It just happened, sadly, yesterday. And it's a very short article, but some people may have even seen it as they're driving down Gulf-to-Bay. But sadly, yesterday on February 2nd, a car crashed into Robert's Christmas Wonderland along Gulf-to-Bay Boulevard in Clearwater, which was on Monday afternoon, according to first responders. What we do know is, according to the Clearwater Police Department and fire crews, that there was a crash just before 5 p.m. after a Nissan Maxima struck the building, and officials say the crash happened around the 2900 block of Gulf-to-Bay Boulevard after the driver lost control of that vehicle. Authorities said that the car crossed 3 eastbound lanes before crashing into the Christmas store. No one inside the shop were injured, thankfully, during the crash, but the driver sadly was taken to Meats Countryside Hospital to be evaluated, possibly for injuries, but there's no clear indication as far as the extent of those. And the crash remained under investigation at the time that I pulled this article. And so that obviously brought up quite a bit of different things, because I always like to look at things that happen in the news. And I'm going to be quite honest, as an attorney, my wheels always start turning as to what could have happened and how do you investigate this? And is this something that could be a claim? If that person were to call our office, is it something we could help them with? And if someone that was somehow involved, is there someone that could be held responsible if they were hurt or injured or even killed as a result of something like this? And so my wheels are always turning when I hear about stuff like this, and especially when it's so close to home. So before we get into that, I know you said you didn't get to go this past holiday, but what do you typically go and you get ornaments?
It's a place I've gone to over the years many, many times, and I have probably most of my Christmas ornaments have come from there over the years. But they have, it's beautiful. It's just enchanting.
So I've heard, yeah.
I many years ago got a beautiful artificial. I always have a live tree, but I for many years had a beautiful white artificial tree too that I'd gotten from there. And I love, and they have all the Christmas villages and all of that.
Yes.
I don't really ever think about them outside of the Christmas time, so I'm glad to be reminded that they actually are open throughout the year.
I would have never thought that. I thought maybe a couple months out of the year,
But it truly is magical. And so I'll have to say, when I saw the picture, it's like, oh my gosh, now hopefully they're not too much damage, but there was visible damage to the front of the store, which has big glass pane windows, that did look like there was some damage there. I'll tell you what this makes me think of as much as anything, though, is having spent really most of my legal career in personal injury.
Yeah.
You too, really. It's like with auto accidents, it's unbelievable the number of scenarios that can happen. In this scenario, from at least the newspaper report, kind of fortunate that hopefully there wasn't any injuries.
That's the way it sounds.
That's the way it sounds.
That's the way it sounds.
But in our world, what it says to me is how alert you have to be when you're on the road at all times. Because I think the driver must have been going, I guess, going west on Gulf-to-Bay, because they said
it had to have been, because that's what I was just trying to get my bearings in the orientation. He said he came across the eastbound lanes of traffic.
And the store does sit off the street a pretty good distance.
A good ways, yeah.
So it really, it's like, wow, I don't know what happened there, but he really did lose control. And that would have been if you happened to be driving, going eastbound. So thank goodness there wasn't anybody.
It doesn't say that he impacted any, or she, I don't know the gender of the driver, but doesn't mention that any cars were hit.
And let me tell you,
just before 5, that's actually quite shocking.
Very shocking. And coming out one of the reasons that I sometimes don't get over to that store like when I've intended to is because, unfortunately, I would say if you're coming out of the store and I would have to make a left to go back to my home onto Gulf-to-Bay. It's normally very busy.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Now, you live in St. Pete, so you could go and you could just slide in there, and then you could just
get off
to
and go
611 and you'll be
bridge,
good.
Yeah.
but so that was very fortunate. But it illustrates just fundamentally what my father taught me when he taught me how to drive. You've got to be a defensive driver
Yeah.
because things happen quick and totally. I mean, I would never in a million years have expected something like that.
Not at all. And so when you approach something like this, like you said, fortunately, no one was injured, including the employees at the store. But if that were the case, let's say someone was exiting and they had left the store, maybe they're going back to their vehicle with their purchases, and then this car comes careening out of nowhere. And we don't know what happened. Why did this car come across, all these lanes of traffic? And you're trying to approach this and investigate it. Because there's multiple, it could be, some sort of medical issue.
Right.
It could be a mechanical failure. How do you typically, investigate something like this?
So certainly, let's add a fact that we are saying, hopefully, fortunately, wasn't present here. But let's suppose there was a driver coming eastbound, and unfortunately, this vehicle goes right in front of them and does have impact. So let's say that occurs, so someone is injured. And does have a question about, what their rights might be. So initially, and of course, in every auto accident case we get, we're going to start by requesting the traffic accident report,
right?
Because the police will certainly do an investigation, certainly in a case like this, for sure. They do in any case, really, of any significant damage, but there'll be that will be a start. But we also do very frequently have investigators that we employ to go take a look, inspect the area, talk to witnesses, see if they can learn more about what caused the accident. And that in a situation like this, there could have been a mechanical issue in the vehicle, potentially, possibly. Could have been a medical issue, which something in that location kind of makes me wonder about that, which that does happen. And in those circumstances, if a person has something completely out of the blue, they had no way to, let's suppose you have a seizure or something of that nature. You've never had a seizure. There's no way you would have ever had a reason to suspect you'd have such a problem. If you truly have a sudden medical emergency that you could not anticipate and couldn't have done anything about, obviously, then in that scenario, there's no fault on the part of the driver. Most times, though, in the years that I've had cases involving medical emergencies, though, there usually is. It's kind of unusual for it to be something completely unexpected. It does happen.
I agree with you.
But normally there's something where a person's kind of maybe pushing the envelope a little bit.
Historical indicators of some kind, medically, that this was known to potentially could occur.
And many times, just being honest about human nature, it's hard not to, you have to drive to get around places, and it's very easy to be in a state of denial, and not recognize that when a vehicle is considered a dangerous instrumentality under the law, and of course it obviously is. So we really need to be sure that that we are in good shape, that there's nothing going on that's affecting our ability to focus on our driving.
Absolutely.
There could be, I think we'll have another one later on. It's obviously people do fall asleep at the wheel sometimes.
Yes. Yep.
And
that's something that I didn't consider for this case, but that's absolutely a possibility.
So something of that nature.
Just because it's, just before 5 p.m. doesn't mean, they couldn't come off of a long shift, or something that caused them to, medication that they could have taken that could have made them drowsy. Yeah.
We don't know.
Things,
but definitely if this had resulted in injury to someone, then that would be something that we would take those steps to investigate and learn more about what occurred. Your ability to investigate can be somewhat limited before you filed a lawsuit, but normally we're able to find enough information through our efforts to have a pretty good idea of what the situation is. But if you have a significant injury and a case that does actually merit filing a lawsuit, or there may be a need to file a lawsuit so that you have subpoena power to do more in-depth investigation, then there are many, many steps that attorneys take to be sure that we're able to get to the bottom of what's actually happened.
Right. And as you mentioned, a lot of that may not really drill down until you get into litigation, when you're able to do the discovery and have that subpoena power. Because I had a similar case that it did involve the driver going into a building, but the driver did come across many, many lanes and then came into my client's line of travel. And one of the defenses that they raised was that there was some recall issue with the steering wheel, and that the defendant driver had some sort of freak incident where she could no longer control the vehicle, and that she was trying to hearken it to some recall issue that had come along with the steering wheel. I was able to kind of disprove that through discovery, but it took getting into litigation and requesting documents and subpoena different things and building a timeline to show that that's really not what happened here. But that is certainly a possibility in cases where I get recall notices all the time where this little issue on your car needs to be fixed, and this thing can cause these problems. And if you knew about it,
right,
and you didn't go get the repairs, and then your vehicle does have this sort of a malfunction,
you have added. So while there might be some issue with the manufacturer of the vehicle, but obviously if you are on notice of a recall that has to do with the safety of the operation of the vehicle, you really don't want to waste any time in getting that taken care of.
Right. Now, one little side note I just want to touch on as well, because a lot of people, I think, are still unsure of how this works when they get hurt on the job. So fortunately, again, no injuries that we're aware of. Thankfully, no one in the store that worked there. There was no reported injuries in our article about that either. But in the event that had happened, if someone was in the course and scope of their employment, decorating, stocking, doing something inside the Christmas store, and here comes this car careening through the building and they get badly injured, some might assume that it's just a standard car accident case. They make a claim against that driver. But is that entirely true?
Well, there would be two claims.
Yeah.
So if you were actually injured while you were working, then you would definitely have a claim for workers' compensation benefits under your employer's insurance, basically, for workers' compensation, and should pursue that, really. In most instances, there are times when people don't want to. If there is what we call a third-party claim, and that would be so the first party is it happened at work, and Florida law requires that employers have unemployment or workers' compensation insurance, so you're covered for your medical, and if you lost time from work, there would be some benefits in those situations. But if you also if you're injured and there's a third party, which in this case would be the outside car owner, driver, whatever, then in that scenario, you have a separate a claim against the person who caused the accident, a separate automobile claim, which would be, kind of straightforward in that way. There are benefits to that are probably a little bit too much inside baseball regarding how the medical and all that works in those situations. But pursuing your legal rights fully would include, in that kind of a situation, both the workers' compensation system, but also the third-party claim against the driver that was at fault in the accident.
Exactly right. And so I think that's a good segue because you touched on it briefly in this article, because we don't quite know what happened to that driver and what was going on. But we have another case where we know what happened to the driver. And I actually had not heard about this incident when it happened. It was not as recent as yesterday as this Clearwater the Christmas store incident. This was actually last month in January I'm sorry, wrong one. We're not there yet. Let's get to the Skyway Bridge accident case. That was in November. So
I had not heard of that one.
I had not heard about it, but it happened at the end of November in 2025. Unfortunately, a Clearwater woman was fatally injured when she was ejected from a vehicle in a crash near the Skyway Bridge. Now, this says that a Clearwater woman was ejected from the vehicle when she was riding in a car when the driver fell asleep. and crashed near the not on the bridge, but near the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, according to FHP. Troopers said that this happened around 4 a.m. So that's relevant, I think. On Sunday, when the Chevy Colorado driven by a 21-year-old Pinellas Park man was going southbound on I-275 near the Skyway Bridge. FHP explains that the driver fell asleep near the Pinellas rest area, causing him to lose control of the vehicle and drive off the highway and hit a tree, followed by a guardrail. The woman was then reportedly ejected from the vehicle and would later die from her injuries after being taken to the hospital. But fortunately, the driver and the other 2 passengers were not injured in that accident. So we have a sad situation here where we know what happened. At 4 a.m., this 21-year-old driver falls asleep during the course of the accident. And this woman, I don't know if she was in the front, but I would imagine she was a front seat passenger. She's ejected and she dies. So how does that really factor in when you approach a case like this where you have a fatality, thinking of it as a wrongful death claim, and it's a claim against the vehicle that the person was physically in. The driver is someone that naturally would likely be known to them, but this person is ejected. It gives you the impression that there may not have been a seatbelt worn. Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of break all that down and look at a case like this?
Yeah, that's, many facts, but one of the things that is a defense in Florida if it can be established, if you did not wear an available, fully operational seatbelt and your injury was substantially caused as a result of that. So the defense would have to be able to prove that, when a person's ejected, obviously it would be fairly likely that there would be some contributing factor there. We don't know all of the facts here, but that could be an issue in this case. And then we have the other complexity. I know we talked off the air a little bit that we've always had the concept of comparative negligence in Florida, which is a really fair, just way to try to look at things that may not be easy, but at least if you go to a jury trial, the jury tries to apportion the percentage that a person might be responsible. And we still do have that, but prior to a change in the law now about 3 years ago, let's suppose in this situation that be 50% responsible. It would be pretty easy to conclude that not wearing the seatbelt significantly contributed to the injuries, but not completely.
Yeah.
Well, if the jury were to make a determination, let's say, 49%, whatever, if they find that she was 50% or actually 51% more responsible, but only 51%, then under those circumstances, there'd be no recovery at all.
It becomes a complete bar.
Prior to the change in the law, there would have been, your recovery would be related to the percentage of responsibility. It would have been reduced by your percentage of responsibilities determined by the jury. But as is always true in these kind of situations, it's very, it's very fact specific. As lawyers, that's why we love doing what we do. Our love is debate and looking at evidence and formulating an argument in favor of our side of the case. So and then a jury decides ultimately based on the jury instructions on the law that they're given. So a lot of difficulties there. And also, big question really is always going to be insurance coverage. The driver clearly was negligent. That if you fall asleep, there's almost no way to get around it. There was negligence there, even though we can all understand how that could happen, but would definitely be negligence. So hopefully that driver had liability coverage of some significant amount, but at age 21, that's a big question.
Unless they're still on, some other more responsible adults.
Maybe perhaps on a parent's policy or something like that. It could be. And if the person that was injured, she would potentially, if she had her own automobile policy and it included uninsured motorist coverage, which we talk about all the time, then there would be other avenues for her family to make a recovery for her wrongful death. Very, very tragic set of circumstances.
Very, very difficult. And I think that what concerns me, and I honestly haven't seen the way this plays out yet in front of a jury, but how much do they have to tilt the scales to say it's 51%?
Right.
I remember back in trial and my trial professor describing the preponderance of evidence standard, and he's like 50% plus the weight of a feather. You just
Right.
you just have to slightly tilt that scale. And if that were the case here, adversely, if it slightly tilts in more than 50%, that seatbelt could have prevented her injury, or that it substantially caused the lack of the seatbelt, I should say, substantially caused the injuries, and it just ever so slightly leans that way, then
Right.
the case, is
Very,
barred.
very, very difficult. You could easily see, particularly with the change in the Florida law, that it could be a challenging
Very, very
case.
difficult. And it's something that I researched years ago, and quite honestly, I can't recall, but I remember once upon a time researching whether you could make claims. This is, like you said, getting kind of into the the soup and the nuts and all those things. But when you're in the vehicle of the person that you're claiming negligence against, and that vehicle not only has a bodily injury policy, but also has a UM policy as the host vehicle. I feel like I researched this years ago, and that it was legal to be able to make both claims. And so that's something that obviously the crafty lawyer obviously has to look at the policy and determine whether that's something that's even viable. But that's always something that I think of. And I remember, I'm like, I researched that years ago.
I sort of think so,
Mhm.
but one of the things, and actually, we can see it's really a matter, we have to become kind of insurance specialists,
Mhm.
at least in the automobile
And
policy
understanding the
realm.
policy language, yeah.
And a lot of that, the policies, although they can be fairly standard, they're not all the same, and the wording. And there's a lot of case law that
Exactly.
addresses all of that kind of thing.
It definitely will be policy specific in a case like that. And so the seatbelt defense, though, regardless, is always something that we want to be very, very mindful of. And so it's not just a thing you're taught as a child. It's certainly wear your seatbelt. It's not only because it can be used against you, but because it can prevent the injuries from being as severe as they might be. And so I don't know if it would have prevented this young lady from being ejected, but you certainly want to protect yourself at all costs. I feel like that's the thing that nightmares are made of,
Yes.
That you're in a car with someone and that person, I literally have had dreams like that where you're in a car and the person falls asleep. I don't know. I don't have any dreamologists out here that can dissect what those dreams mean, but I literally have had dreams like that. And so it's like, oh my gosh, poor kid. They didn't say what the ages were, but if the driver was 21, I suspect the passengers were likely
Probably were
young
younger.
too.
Yeah.
So kids, folks, teenagers, young people, wear your seatbelts at all times, especially in the wee hours of the morning and the late hours of the night.
And if there's any problem with staying awake, pull over to the side of the road.
Absolutely.
And take a nap.
I think that's a good time to take a short break. We have some more current events, some relevant headlines straight out of Tampa Bay news stories. But we're going to come back after the break and get into about 2 more stories if we have the time. But this is FLALAW live on the radio, and we will be back after a short break with your live legal commentary.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
And we are back live on the air with FLALAW on the radio. Thanks for tuning in. We have been on the air live since 5, giving you some live legal commentary on Tampa Bay headlines and news stories that have been current in our local area. We've touched on the recent crash that happened when a car went into the front of the Clearwater Christmas store yesterday. And then, of course, we talked about just before the break, an unfortunate fatal accident that happened near the Skyway Bridge as a result of a driver who fell asleep. So this next story got a lot of news. I did hear about this one. It was in the news for quite a while, and I'm sure it's not quite over because I don't believe this person has gone to trial yet. And so I suspect that it may come back up in the news in the future. But it was quite sad because it did result in quite a few people, unfortunately, losing their lives as a result of a crash that happened in Ybor City. So I'm just going to go ahead and read a little bit of the article, and then we will jump into this story. This happened when a Dade City man, unfortunately, crashed into 4 people who were killed in Ybor City in Tampa when it looks as though there was some sort of pursuit. And so it says at the highway, there was one vehicle that kind of broke off and headed south on I-275. I believe it was as a result of some kind of traffic stop. The vehicle then exited the downtown area, and the highway patrol attempted an unsuccessful traffic stop at Nebraska and Palm. As a result of that, the FHP did attempt a pit maneuver, but was unable to stop the speeding car. One of the sergeants spoke briefly at a press conference about the incident, saying that his troopers disengaged with the driver after the car proceeded into Ybor City. So that's good news to know that they did. The car then sped down 7th Avenue and crashed near a bar named Bradley's, plowing down more than a dozen people who were standing outside. Police did not specify what kind of damage the building sustained, but let's see. Tables, chairs, things, obviously people went flying. It was bad, according to somebody who witnessed the accident. 3 of the victims did die right there at the scene. Unfortunately, the 4th person later died at the hospital. The witness described it as a very shocking scene. The police obviously got there very quickly. They had to bust out the window and drag the guy out of the vehicle. People were trying to give CPR and give aid to those that were at the scene. And so the suspect is a 22-year-old. He was arrested. He's been charged with 4 felony counts of vehicular homicide, 4 felony counts of aggravated fleeing, and serious bodily injury. It looks like he's has a record of some speeding charges and different things of that nature, but they don't mention anything of any, greater severity other than speeding. So we have a very sad incident of people being fatally injured, just kind of standing outside of a bar in Ybor City, and this car that is, fleeing police, which doesn't sound like it's a police pursuit per se, because it sounds like they did disengage, but this car is fleeing at a high rate of speed and crashes into a crowd of people. Very, very sad. And so what we have is multiple people who have been killed and injured. We have what began as initial police pursuit, but then disengaged from that. We have a person who's now incarcerated for criminal charges, not necessarily civil. And then we have a bar who, I guess, allows people to kind of congregate outside the front of the bar. So how do you look at this scenario from a civil and negligence perspective?
So this is really, when we go to law school, we have an injury, we call it a tort,
A tort,
which
yes.
I still think of that as something to eat, but you look at, there's so many aspects of the law that come into play here. So we know only just the newspaper version,
right?
Very, very limited one at that. But
right,
I did notice in looking at the story that you have a situation where the police, they did disengage, but it was literally seconds before. And they had disengaged because of.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because they didn't really make it
Yeah, I saw there was some article, it might not have been that one when I just went to look on background. It was maybe 10 seconds or something.
Okay.
And they disengaged. Now, again, this is the newspaper, and they disengaged because of
the proximity of all the people.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine,
it's very busy and the traffic is heavy.
It's been years since I've been down there, but in my younger years when I would go to Ybor, I mean, very young. I was very young, old enough to go though. I will say, but that was kind of people would just hang out in the streets, and there was crowds of people in the road, and the roads would almost be kind of blocked a little bit around the bars, so you wouldn't have a lot of through traffic, but then some would be through.
So it's interesting that there's a story, it actually was from today, that there was the city council had gave people an opportunity to talk about things they might want to change. And one of the things that was mentioned was that there was a time in the past when they did kind of make it like more of a pedestrian type of an area. Mm-hmm. But as we've discussed before in our various shows over the years, things that are policy decisions by the government are not things that you can sue for. So they did reduce the speed limit from 30 to 25. There were a lot of discussions. Some people were requesting maybe they should make it just like just a walking area.
Sure.
But there were concerns about that. Yeah. So there would be no governmental responsibility. In theory, there might be, depending on the circumstances, the particular restaurant establishment or whatever, although I think not really. But if they had, it was like, I read one description where it was like a patio area or something like that. There could be what they call bollards. You could have things, put cement posts and things like that to protect an area, that type of thing.
I agree.
But I think in the same article I read on that, it was, they've had nothing like that. They've had no fatality in 10 years. Yeah. So it's not like there was any way to expect this. This was just basically a terrible, terrible circumstance. So again, in terms of the loss of life here, it's really largely likely the responsibility of the individual, the young man that is in jail now and charged with very serious crimes. And hopefully there was some insurance coverage available, but obviously with 4 deaths, was it? I mean, I think it was 4 people died, and
3 at the scene and 1 later at the hospital.
Yeah, really, really a terrible, terrible circumstance. Yeah. So I thought it actually was good that there was discussion within the city council about ideas that you might have to try to address.
I agree.
This because
I think that's what people hope to see when something like this happens. How can we change the dynamic so that this doesn't happen again? And so that does show some accountability, on those and that government body. But my question is, let's assume that there's coverage or that there's claims that proceed, and this individual who is being pursued, or the tortfeasor, if you will, he's incarcerated and he's facing criminal charges, and he likely is represented by counsel for the criminal case.
Right.
And now these civil lawsuits begin to pop up. How does that impact the civil side of the case?
Well, he's, as a defendant in the criminal cases, it's unlikely to be able to offer testimony. Right. And I would say that from the perspective of handling a case on behalf of injured plaintiffs, as lawyers, you would expect to be able to get those cases settled.
Yeah,
you know,
I would expect
yeah,
so.
you know,
Yeah.
because the facts are very bad for the defendant. Now, you know, and the damages are astronomical, actually. So, and in the normal situation, unfortunately, as we so often see, the likelihood of a significant amount of liability insurance is probably not high.
Probably not.
You
Yeah.
know, but you know, one can hope, because it, not that money can ever undo anything, but at least some compensation.
If any case is warranted, it'd be a case
right.
like
Oh
this,
my goodness,
for sure.
just-
Now, you mentioned the government bodies having conversations about what they can do to fix the issue, or maybe make the area safer so that something like this wouldn't happen again. But what about the private owners? They mentioned that the bar was named Bradley's. They say Bradley's has a practice of allowing their patrons to just come out and linger around the outdoor patio or the outdoor area of their establishment. I don't know that this is a seating area, or if they've just kind of standing around,
really sure about that.
congregating. Like I said, in my day, if people would just stand around. They're just kind of standing outside the door. Every now and then, maybe bouncers would say, "Hey, move it along," and kind of keep the door clear. But for the most part, it was okay to just stand around. Do you see that as being an issue at all for, you know, the private business owners?
It would be something that if a family member came to us, you know, that we would obviously investigate. I do think it's a pretty hard call there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen the place, but I mean, as I say, the theoretical idea is that you could put up, maybe you wouldn't allow people to be near the street. You could put up cement barriers of some kind to protect, you know, from some type of, because obviously one thing we know, we're talking about it tonight. I mean, it's people losing control of their vehicles is not uncommon.
Not at all.
No, I mean, it is something that absolutely does happen.
Yeah. And it made me actually visualize, I think I talked about this once on the show with Bryant Caulfield. So he frequents downtown St. Pete, and there's this area in the beach, I want to say Beach Drive, and I forget the cross section, but it's right as you go into the pier. And there's these little restaurants that, of course, encourage you to sit out in their patio. They have the patio and they have the chairs, and that's part of the aesthetic and the draw is that you get to sit out and you can see people walking by. But the roads aren't shut down. The cars can still, you know, go by, the trolleys and things like that. Now, granted, they're not traveling at a high rate of speed, but they're still driving by.
Right.
And so if someone loses control and they come careening through these people that are sitting out there eating their meal,
Right.
and they're in a designated area for it, how does that, you know, kind of play into those
Well,
things?
it raises a question about whether that is exercising reasonable care under the circumstances. Yeah. And that's kind of probably a debatable question.
Yeah.
When we see this story from Ybor City, it makes me think, I don't know if I want to sit outside like that. You know, but so it would depend on,
Makes you think twice now about it.
Oh yeah.
Enjoying your outdoor dining.
And it is tough as a business owner, you know, because you cannot foresee all things, obviously, and the law doesn't require that you do that. So it would, if you had a set of circumstances where maybe there have been some close calls or things like that, that put or should have put the owner on notice that there was a significant risk there, then I think, you know, you would start to have a stronger claim. And again, I would also say you'd kind of have to look at the actual location to see how close it is to the road and that sort of thing too.
Right, exactly. And also just a word to the wise. I think a lot of people know this, but I don't know if this gentleman, I'll use that term loosely, the individual that's being accused of this owned the vehicle that he was in.
Right.
But people always have to be aware that if you let someone use your car, you give them permission to drive your vehicle. You become liable as well for the accident that occurred. And so these deaths, these fatalities, you become as responsible as well as a defendant.
We would sue the owner of the vehicle.
Absolutely.
And actually, in a case like this with the criminal defendant, I mean, that creates great complexity in the analysis of the case, because the jury in a civil case would have to decide what elements of negligence. I mean, they would certainly find this fellow negligent, but if we were to try to find other parties, such as the business establishment, all of that, try to hold them in to some degree of accountability, a jury is asked to apportion responsibility between them and this person that actually did commit a criminal act.
Yeah.
So very, very difficult, but illustrates the point we talk about all the time, which is that if something happens to you or a family member, it does merit seeking out consultation with attorneys that handle these types of matters, so that an investigation can be conducted to be sure that if there is a possibility of getting some sort of a claim that would result in reasonable compensation, that you'd at least have the opportunity to explore that.
Exactly right. And stick around to the end of the show. We'll give you all our contact information so that you know how to reach us if that's something that arises for you or your family. Very quickly, we just have a few short minutes left. We have one last article that we'll touch on. This is the one that happened last month on January 6th. There was a car crash in Tampa where someone hit a police cruiser head on. It says that the Tampa Police Department had launched an investigation Tuesday night after a car crashed head on into a police cruiser around 8 p.m. on South Del Mabry Highway, just north of Gandy Boulevard, near Britton Plaza. Tampa police said a car, and this is where it gets confusing, so I want you to pay attention. Tampa police said a car cut off a woman who was driving a white Lexus. The woman then reportedly crashed into that car, overcorrected, and went into oncoming traffic where she hit the police cruiser.
That was a bad day.
Yes. The officer and the woman driving the Lexus were taken to the hospital as a precaution. Their conditions were unknown at the time that this article was written. So we have a police car. You have a woman who gets cut off by another vehicle. If she tries to avoid that vehicle, but does too much of a correction and ends up hitting that car and then going into the path of the police officer. How do you dissect and analyze liability here when you have kind of a car that was cut off? It wasn't necessarily initially her fault, but then a lot of other things happened after that.
Yeah, I think you would look at, I mean, in a situation, the car that, quote, cut her off, you would be looking at that vehicle as really the beginning of the responsibility here. And of course, we know how hard it is when you're driving anywhere. It's just amazing how people drive, actually. When you do our kind of work, you're very aware of this. So the car cutting her off. So you have that element, how the lady responded. Right. Is there an element of negligence there? It's, obviously you do what you can. So that's a little hard.
That's where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
It's like,
I would say that,
does she have some comparative fault? I think it's natural human reaction to try to correct and avoid and to take evasive action.
Right. And I'm not so sure how easy it is. It would depend really on what happened there. Now, again, it's also emphasized the importance of always trying to stay ahead of what's happening around you when you're driving. It's easy to say this, obviously hard to do it. Because people will cut us off. People will assume the worst, unfortunately, on the road.
Always be a defensive driver. Always, always, always. So, Lorrie, that has been our show for tonight. We took it straight out of the Tampa Bay headlines and went over some current events. I hope that our listeners were able to learn something about the law and, of course, also about safety and just being aware of their surroundings. If you need us for any personal injury related matter, give us a call, 727-796-8282 or usalaw.com. That's how you find us on the web. This has been FLA Law live on the radio. We will see you all next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Thank you, Lorrie.
Thank you.